So, our next presenter is Vanessa Youngblood. For the past 7 years, Vanessa has been extensively involved in the restoration management field from the forest to the river. She is currently the restoration manager for Willamette Riverkeeper, an organization in Oregon that works to protect, conserve, and restore the Willamette River and its tributaries. Please help me in welcoming Vanessa.
Thank you. It's just really great to be here today and actually be able to share a little bit about the aquatic weed work we do in Oregon. Um, as you know, Vanessa Youngblood, I work for an organization called Willamette Riverkeeper. We are a small nonprofit with about 7 employees, and we work on all 187 miles of the Willamette plus some of its tributaries. Um, we focus on all sorts of things. We do some legal issues, focus on bills that could or are impacting the watershed. We do cleanups, weekly cleanups on the river, actually, with our River Guardians program, and also do a river discovery program where we get people out for recreation to just explore the river and get to know it. And then we also have a large focus on habitat restoration, which is where I come in. We do both terrestrial and aquatic work, but my summer is largely spent on the river working with aquatic invasives. So today I'll be talking about one of my favorite projects that I get to manage. We work and partner with Benton Soil and Water Conservation District and Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District, and it's supplemented under the Oregon State Weed Board grants through ODA and OWEB. And I actually have the pleasure of being on all three of or being a part of all three of those grants through just project details. I get to physically be on the river for every survey and treatment. And I also collect all the data and research to share with ODA. So, to provide a little bit of background about the Willamette River and its importance to our state, the Willamette is 187 miles long, and it's one of the few rivers that flows north where it feeds into the Columbia River. The Willamette is the 13th largest river by annual volume within the U.S., and it's claimed to have the second largest waterfall by volume in the U.S., and that's at the Willamette Falls in Oregon City. And 70% of Oregon's population resides in its watershed, so a lot of people depend on this river in our state. And I think what's really distinctive is that the whole river really lies entirely within the state, which is pretty cool. So this map shows the full range of the Willamette that we're covering with the aquatic EDRR weed work, which is 130 miles in length. And that number is not including all of the side channels, alcoves, and sloughs that we're going back into as well. Our project stretches over 6 different counties, so there's quite a few land use permits that we have to secure before we can go out and begin each year. Our two target EDRR weeds are yellow floating heart, Nymphoides peltata, and garden yellow loosestrife, or some call it garden loosestrife, which is Lismachia vulgaris. They're both A-listed weeds in our state, and they both are intense yellow flowered invasives. Just for a quick show of hands, I was just curious how many people have dealt with yellow floating heart in their state. Okay, nice, fair amount. How about garden yellow loosestrife? Okay, yeah, I believe it just hit Montana this last year, so it's really great to be able to just be sharing experiences together with that. Um, and just to share some quick ID tips for maybe some of you who aren't familiar with this, yellow floating heart is an aquatic emergent perennial with floating leaves that are heart-shaped to round. The leaves can have wavy margins and are often covered with purple glandular spotting. A telling sign to separate it from some of our native lookalikes is it has a slit or divide in the middle of the leaf, which is where the petiole attaches. It has 5 fused petals with a bright yellow color, which is kind of a common theme in the aquatic noxious weed world. And each petal can either have wavy or ruffled margins, which create kind of a fringe, which is actually an adaptation of the species for water level fluctuations. And garden yellow loosestrife is an emergent perennial found anywhere between the high water mark on a bank all the way down to the water's edge. The leaves are lanceolate to ovate and are arranged in opposite or in whorls of 3 to 5. And the leaves are mostly sessile, meaning the leaf attaches directly to the stem. And the stems are mostly covered with short, soft hairs, and they're often round, which is kind of a telling feature to set them apart from purple loosestrife, which has the square stems. They can also be fasciated in some cases, which is an abnormal flattening of the stems, although I haven't yet seen this in Oregon, but Ben Peterson from King County could probably touch on this more tomorrow with the identification workshop. And again, this species also has 5 fused yellow petals, but they're arranged in terminal panicles, meaning they mature from the bottom up. Um, it reproduces by rhizomes, stolons, and seeds, and its most successful way of spreading is through its vegetative expansion, so meaning their underground stem structure. And it can also remain in its vegetative state for multiple years, which makes it really hard to identify with early detection. Um, and in Oregon, it can be mistaken with Lismachia punctata, which is its less aggressive ornamental sister. So methods. So we broke up 130 miles of the river into 16 paddles. However, this last year we faced some challenges, so it ended up being more like 21 days on the river. And we split those between all 3 of our grants. Starting in 2022, we also changed our approach to be more effective in reaching a rapid response approach. So we brought our contractors simultaneously on the river with us to treat while we're surveying. In past years, we had just done the surveys and recorded points for them to come out, and I think we've been a lot more successful in the last couple of years adding that. Um, and yeah, I also think it helped really mitigate further spread during that season as well, just to be able to treat on point right away. So this is a really unique project. One, because we get to partner with so many different entities and there's a lot of moving parts to fully coordinate it all. But one of the most unique and also challenging components is that we're really reaching every single one of these populations by canoes. Um, I think there's 1 or 2 exceptions, but it's just really not your terrestrial or typical terrestrial project where you can go survey and treat and really visit it all summer long. We really have to carefully plan and coordinate each survey and stretch based off of multiple factors like water levels, the plant phenology, available boat ramps, which last year we had 2 closed, so we had to get kind of creative of where we could put in. And we can really only bring enough equipment, safety gear, herbicide, and people that we can fit in the boats. So we're quite limited. It also takes a specific skill set as far as knowing, the plant identification, knowing their ideal habitat, but also having the moving water experience. We required a couple people to have for water rescue training if something were to happen. And just even the I call it shuttleology, which even that is tricky sometimes. Um, so this is an example actually of how I break up the stretches for each grant, and I try to do the closest available takeouts, but some portions of the river, those are 15 miles long, which can be a really long day, especially going back up all the side channels and sloughs. So that's where I'll reach out to a landowner and try to see if we can maybe put in on their property to split that stretch up a little bit. So these are 3 maps showing our fulcrum data for each year recorded the last 3 years and treated of yellow floating heart. And it basically in 2021, I think we had 11 populations. And in 2022, we went up to 19 locations. And then in 2023, we went back down to 15 locations. And just as a reminder, in 2021, we didn't have our contractors simultaneously with us. So it's really hard to know if that was a factor in the populations increasing in 22. Like maybe something was missed, but it also could just be spread. It's really hard to know for sure. So But looking at this map, so the yellow dots are showing patches that were found in 2022, but they weren't found in our 2023 surveys. So meaning those three patches were gone the next year. It's hard to say if they'll come back, but we'll see. And then the purple dots are just identifying new patches we found in 2023. So this population was the largest by coverage and volume that we found in 22. It's located in the upper Willamette area around River Mile 147 near Halsey, if any of you know Oregon. And so it's really hard to get before and after photos when on the river. So usually they'll be kind of a year later just to see what that treatment did. So this is before treatment on 2022, and that whole area back there and actually extended even further was all yellow floating heart, and then before treatment in 2023. So I'm, yeah, really curious to see what it looks like this next year. A Mazamox. And this population was sorry, yeah, was actually 800 yards upstream from the last population. It was new in 2023. And it really was interesting because we started seeing it way higher up on the banks. So if there was still any moisture in the substrate, it was growing up there, some places about 7 feet high on the banks. There was definitely still some in the water, but the majority of it was just creeping up on the banks. And we found this patch kind of at the end of our day, which makes it challenging because they're long days already. So I actually figured out who the landowners were, and it made it way easier. We were able to go in, drive in, and just treat from the property, which really saved us time. And yeah, the trying to get back out for another stretch is really hard. So these were just some of the photos of kind of those newer patches or patterns I was talking about, just really growing back up on the banks and also really competing with other vegetation. So these are, foot tall grasses, nut sedge, cocklebur, and some other species. So we really had to kind of peel apart the vegetation. I started incorporating pin flags because that made sure we weren't missing anything, because some of those leaves are, I mean, a couple inches big. They're really are small. They're really hard to find. So garden loosestrife. This is a plant that we haven't been working on too long in Oregon. Just for a bit of history, in 2016, the Oregon Department of Agriculture got an anonymous tip from the weed hotline that a patch had been found, and they came out and treated it that year, and then again in 2017. Then it was added to Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District's county grant for 2018 and 19, and I'm not 100% sure on what the level of treatment they were doing those 2 years. But then in 2020 and 2021, they expanded their project to cover a 5-mile stretch of the river, and in 2021 we found 8 populations there. And just kind of an important fact too is that these locations on the Willamette are the only locations in our entire state. So it's a huge priority to control this. So these are again some 3 fulcrum maps, just showing the last 3 years. And in 2022, Yamhill really expanded their proposal from 5 miles to 23 miles. And that was from Kaiser Rapids Park to San Salvador Park, which maybe if anybody knows Oregon. And so when they were writing the proposal, they actually reached out to us at Willamette Riverkeeper just to help manage the project, this component, through the planning. And we've got boats and all of the equipment, so we were able to do all the surveys and treatments. But 2022 was actually a really challenging year. We had a really wet spring and prolonged high water, and that actually pushed back the plant development about a month and a half for all of our aquatic weeds. So within these, we're typically trying to plan them a couple months in advance, just because there's so many different surveys. And I had to kind of start from scratch after or at the beginning of that summer. So this picture is a very beautiful picture, but it is covered in purple loosestrife and garden yellow loosestrife. But it's also really telling because if you were to erase all of those yellow flowers, the vegetation actually looks really similar to purple loosestrife. So when we're focusing particularly just on yellow loosestrife, garden yellow loosestrife, it's really hard to be able to kind of determine the two. I often go around and really just feel the stems because that can really help either the roundness or the hairs. But yeah, we came and treated this one. Um, and yeah, I was gonna do an after picture, but I forgot to put that one in. So this is the garden yellow loosestrife again. It's intermixed with a lot of different invasives like Ludwigia, cocklebur, or sorry, reed canary grass, but it also has some natives, the nodding beggar's tick, cocklebur, and some willows actually too. And so the picture to the right, you can see kind of some of those really smaller shoots, which really can tell how hard it can be to find. And so this was similar to the yellow floating heart where we were really peeling back grasses and vegetation, except these were like 4 feet tall. So we had to be really meticulous. The pin flags worked, but yeah, it was definitely a team effort to get every little shoot. So overall, I think we really learned a lot more from this year. I think one huge learning came after a paddle that we did, and we passed a couple patches we had treated 2 weeks prior. I just wanted to see kind of what the kill looked like, only to find the plants really perky and looking like nothing had happened. And so I had a moment of panic and then called ODA and our Northwest rep for a Mazamox. And he said with a Mazamox, it can take 4 to 6 weeks to show. Yeah, I was a little reassured, but yeah, definitely important to know. And we did in 2023, we actually increased our percentage. We had started with a 2.5 to 3% mix. And in 2022 or 2023, for those larger populations, we increased it to 4.5%, which of course still staying in our label rates. But so I thought since I'm talking about yellow flowered invasives, I would briefly touch on our Ludwigia work. We have both Ludwigia hexapetala and Peploides in our state. I don't believe it's in Montana yet. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe one of you guys would know. Um, it is. Okay, well, it is all over the Willamette River and has been for over a decade. Um, and so these are just 5 sites that our organization has been conducting Ludwigia work on. And there's multiple other entities that also work all on different locations on the Willamette, but these ones were prioritized in the Willamette, the Wapato Revival Plan as just high priority sites to treat. Um, and I'll just breeze through some of these before and afters. So this is Black Dog Landing, which in Oregon is kind of a historic Ludwigia population. I was really excited we were able to partner with Oregon Parks and Recreation in 2022 to complete 2 treatments that season. Sadly, they're on a biennium, and so they did not have funding for 2023 to treat, which we typically like to do 5 years of consecutive treatments. But this next year, we just signed a contract to do 2 more years for the following years. And I guess just to explain a little bit about our methods of treatment for Ludwigia, we've integrated 2 treatments this season. Typically, we start in July, August, and then about a month later, we do our follow-up second treatment. And that point being really, it allows if there's any other new growth, we can hit that, or anything we might have missed will also come out in that month. So this is, oh, nope, that's not. Sorry. This is Gale Ackerman Wildlife Area, which we actually do terrestrial restoration and aquatic restoration on. Um, this particular site, we've had 6 years of funding for the aquatic work, which is rare. I feel like we usually only get 5. But it's been incredible to see just the natural recruitment of wapato, Sagittaria latifolia, which is also common name duck potato. But yeah, even after 3 years of our Ludwigia treatment, it freed up a lot of space for the native seed bank to just resurge all the wapato. And I actually paddle on all 187 miles of the river, and I'm pretty positive this is the biggest patch of wapato I've ever seen. We had an intern who was like 6 feet tall, and even he, I mean, it was like just at his head in some of the areas. So it's pretty incredible. And this is Minto Brown. It's Willamette Slough. We worked on this in partner with the City of Salem. We had 3 years of funding, but we were actually able to stretch it to include one more year of treatment. So we got 4 years of treatment here. This also connects to the main stem. So all of these populations are either back channels or just side channels of the Willamette. But this one is a little bit more public facing. So this was where we would start tabling or getting out to make sure the public knew what we were doing. People always are like, "Oh, these beautiful yellow flowers. Why are you getting rid of them?" So it's yeah, the education component is really important to be out there and explain why we're doing this work. And this is Windsor Slough, which is an 85-acre slough. It connects to the main stem too. It's in Willamette Mission State Park, and it's mostly in the Oregon State Park, but it also connects to a bunch of bordering farmland and a gravel company. So getting the access points there was a lot of landowner outreach and concerns with some of the farmers. So we had to yeah, work together to try to get those permissions over the last year or 2 years. We've done 2 years of treatment there, but the first year we actually could only do the first 15 acres. It took us a lot longer than we thought to get the 2300A permit through DEQ. So, but this last year we treated all 85 and we'll continue for the next 3 years. And this is Mission Lake, which is in the same state park as that last one. It actually connects to Windsor Slough at higher water levels. And this one we've treated for 5 years. And we have not seen any natural recruitment here, but we did really get to that kind of hand pull stage, which is kind of what we focus on reaching after the 5 years. And that's where we start utilizing volunteers and doing what we call paddle and pulls, which we have some really great, incredible volunteer supporters down there. And just to point out, there's like a tiny, in the left picture, tiny little speck, and that is one of our contractors. These mats they become dense, really, really dense mats, and they can actually walk out on there with their hoses. And yeah, I wouldn't advise it, but the contractors, they love it. So speaking of paddle and pulls, so these are exactly what they sound like. We are typically get like 20 plus volunteers out on the river, and we are paddling and pulling weeds. It's just a wonderful opportunity to get folks out to learn why this resource is so important. They learn how to identify the aquatic invasives, how to report them, how to properly pull and dispose of them, and it's just also a really rewarding summer day. And volunteers, these are just a couple more pictures of our pool days. I always like to say, never estimate the power of volunteers. They really move mountains, and we're just really grateful for all the support we have with our volunteer support on the Willamette. Another component that I include in our grant is what we call a peer-to-peer day. And this is just a chance for colleagues to get out on the river for a day and just to share AIS knowledge, whether it's, plant identification tips, or just discussing where different patches are or treatment options. This last year, we focused largely on garden loosestrife just because a lot of people haven't seen it in our state, and so especially flowering. So to be able to get out there and get more sets of eyes on it to know what they're looking for was really valuable. And this day actually ended up being, we ended up finding quite a few more populations. So I think everybody really got a good feel for what this weed looks like. So I mentioned a little bit about the Willamette River um, being important to our state. It's the largest watershed covering over 11,500 square miles, and it also includes over 13 major tributaries. So figuring out how to tackle invasives over such a large area really involves a large-scale collaborative effort. So in 2014, a diverse working group of natural resource and conservation professionals from universities, government agencies, watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, and just so many other organizations um, came together and they formed what we call the Willamette Aquatic Invasive Network. We call it WAIN for short. And the purpose of WAIN is really to implement strategic actions to protect and restore our aquatic and riparian ecosystems, and of course the water quality as well in the basin. And in 2021, Wayne developed what we call the Wapato Revival Plan, which reflects our group's action plan to address any issues of AIS in the Willamette Basin. And that is just a QR code if anybody is interested in checking that out. It is quite a large document, just to let you know, but there's a lot of information as far as prioritization mapping and just kind of the action plan that we created in our state. And I think that is it. So yeah, thank you so much for having me and letting me share a little bit about our work. These are just some pictures of the partners who also make it possible. And if anyone wants to talk about weeds, that's my contact information too. So yeah, thank you.
Do you have a control program for purple loosestrife as well as garden, or is garden more targeted to purple loosestrife?
Yeah, purple loosestrife. So it's a B-listed weed in our state, and so we focus. The Oregon State Weed Board funding is largely just around A-listed EDRR weeds. So it's hard when you're out there because it's like, oh, I really want to treat you too, but oh yeah, yeah, that was yeah, and that was bummed I didn't include the after picture because yeah, it was pretty good, but.
Maybe one more question?
When you guys do like the power calls and stuff, how do you just
That's a great question. So you saw all those huge plastic bags. So in the past, they have put it to the landfill, but since I've started, we end up either just dumping it out in the back of a dump truck, and then OPRD usually brings it to their burn pile and burns it there too. Yeah, we had a volunteer who got really upset about the plastic bags, and I made sure they knew I reuse them, I wash them out, reuse them for later on. So yeah, great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.